AITA for refusing to thank my SIL cause she had to babysit her own kids. I'm 22, and I have a brother who's 35. Growing up, we were always really close despite the big age gap. He was like a second dad to me in some ways because he's so much older, but at the same time, he always made me feel like an equal. When I was little, he'd teach me things, take me out for ice cream when I had a bad day, and just generally always have my back. Our relationship has always been one of the most important ones in my life, and honestly, I thought it was the same for him. 6 months ago, he surprised me in the most amazing way. He planned a trip to Scotland for my birthday. Scotland has been my dream destination for as long as I can remember. I've never even traveled out of the country before, so this was a huge deal for me. I couldn't believe he had done this, especially considering how tight finances can be. The trip was just for the two of us, which made sense. His wife and kids weren't coming along, and honestly, I didn't think anything of it. My sister-in-law had said she was happy for me and encouraged me to enjoy myself. She even told me she didn't mind taking care of the kids and holding down the fort at home while we were away. For context, my relationship with my sister-in-law has always been polite but distant. We don't dislike each other, but we've never been close. She's not really the kind of person who clicks with my family, and I think a lot of that has to do with how different our upbringings were. My family is super tight-knit. We're the type of siblings who talk every day, who show up for each other without question. I think she's always found it a little overwhelming and maybe even intrusive. She's made comments before about how we're too involved in each other's lives, and while I've always brushed it off, I can tell she's not a fan of how close we all are. But I figured she'd made her peace with it over the years. Anyway, the trip was absolutely incredible. I'll never forget it. Scotland was everything I dreamed it would be and more. The landscapes, the castles, the history, I was on cloud 9 the entire time. My brother and I had the best time together, laughing, exploring, and just bonding like we always have. When we got back, I couldn't stop thanking him. I must have said, "Thank you," 100 times before he finally told me to stop because I was being annoying about it. It was honestly just such a kind and thoughtful gesture on his part, and I felt so lucky to have a brother who would go out of his way to make my dream come true. So imagine my shock when, 3 days after we got back, I received a text from my sister-in-law that completely blindsided me. It wasn't a casual message or even something mildly passive-aggressive. No, it was a full-blown tirade. She accused me of being rude and ungrateful because I hadn't sent her a message specifically thanking her for babysitting her own children while we were away. Her words weren't just pointed, they were dripping with disdain. She went on and on about how she had to do everything around the house for an entire week while I was off having fun with her husband. Her husband. The way she framed it made it sound so inappropriate, so calculated, as if I had swooped in to steal her partner rather than simply gone on a trip with my brother. A trip that was planned and agreed upon months in advance. Those were her exact words, and they echoed in my head long after I read them. I stared at my phone for what felt like an eternity, completely flabbergasted. Babysitting her own kids. Since when is parenting your own children considered babysitting? And how, exactly, was any of this about me? I didn't ask her to stay home with her kids. I didn't demand anything of her. She's their mother. That's her role, isn't it? The whole situation felt so ridiculous that I wondered if I was missing something, some unspoken expectation or etiquette that had escaped me. But no matter how much I turned it over in my mind, I couldn't find any way to make sense of her anger. This wasn't a favor she had done for me, it was a part of her life, a responsibility she had willingly taken on when she became a parent. And yet, here she was, acting as though I had personally imposed on her, forced her to make some great sacrifice, and then selfishly taken it for granted. I tried to keep my cool, even though I could feel my frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. I responded as calmly and neutrally as I could, saying that I didn't really see how taking care of her own children was a favor to me. I wasn't trying to be dismissive, I just genuinely didn't understand how she had arrived at this conclusion. Well, that response didn't go over well. It was like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. She blew up, unleashing a torrent of insults and accusations. She called me a terrible, ungrateful brat and said that I never showed appreciation for anything. Her words were so over the top, so venomous, that I almost couldn't believe what I was reading. It felt like she had been holding on to this anger for far longer than the week we had been gone, and now, for whatever reason, she had decided to unleash it all on me. She ranted about how hard it had been for her to handle everything on her own while we were gone, as though I had orchestrated some elaborate scheme to leave her stranded. She painted herself as a martyr, a victim of my selfishness, and claimed that I didn't value her sacrifice. But what sacrifice? What had I asked of her, really? My brother and I had gone on a trip he had planned and paid for entirely on his own. I hadn't asked for anything from her, not her time, not her energy, not her approval. And yet, here she was, acting like I had personally burdened her in some profound and unforgivable way. By this point, I was so confused and upset that I felt like I couldn't handle it on my own. I needed to talk to someone who might be able to help me make sense of this, or at least provide some clarity. So I called my brother, hoping he could offer some perspective. To my surprise, instead of helping, he doubled down. He told me that the trip wouldn't have been possible if my sister-in-law hadn't volunteered to stay home with the kids, and that I should have thanked her for making it happen. I was stunned. Volunteered? How was staying home with her own children a favor to me? And why was this being framed as some grand act of charity on her part? She's their mother, not a nanny doing someone a favor. The more he talked, the more baffled I became. It was like I had entered some alternate reality where the basic expectations of parenthood had been warped into a currency for guilt and obligation. I didn't even know how to respond to him. I thanked him again for the trip and told him how much it meant to me, but I couldn't bring myself to apologize to my sister-in-law for something that felt so absurd. Still, to keep the peace, I sent her a text thanking her for helping make the trip possible. I kept it short and polite, but she wasn't satisfied. She accused me of being insincere and made it clear she didn't think my apology was good enough. She also convinced my brother to go low contact with me. Suddenly, the person who had been one of my closest allies my entire life was pulling away from me. Our once daily conversations turned into weekly texts, and even those felt cold and distant. Every time I tried to talk to him about it, he would say something about how I needed to respect his wife and show more gratitude for what she'd done. My siblings and my mom were just as baffled as I was. They couldn't believe how much this had escalated over something so ridiculous. They've been encouraging me to just bite my tongue and let it go for the sake of keeping the peace, but it's hard. I feel so hurt and betrayed. I miss my brother. I miss the closeness we used to have. I've been replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out if I really did something wrong or if this is just my sister-in-law projecting her own insecurities onto me. Am I really in the wrong here? Should I have gone out of my way to thank her for taking care of her own children? Or is this whole situation as irrational and unfair as it feels to me? I just don't know what to do anymore. Edit. After sharing my story, I've been overwhelmed by the response. I honestly didn't expect so many people to weigh in, and while I wish I could reply to everyone individually, it's just not possible. There are a few points that I feel need to be clarified, though, because some assumptions have been made, and I want to make sure I'm giving the full picture. First, I feel like I should address the financial aspect of the trip, since a lot of people seem to think my sister-in-law might have contributed or sacrificed something financially for me to go on this trip. Let me be clear, they do not share finances. My brother has his own separate bank account, and everything for the trip, flights, accommodations, meals, everything, was paid for entirely out of his own pocket. My sister-in-law didn't spend a single penny on anything related to this trip. My brother and I even had a conversation about this before we went, because I felt a little guilty knowing how tight money can be for him. I asked him several times if he was sure this was okay, and he reassured me that he had saved up for it and wanted to do this for me as a birthday gift. So, any suggestion that she made a financial sacrifice for me to go is just not true. What's more, I later found out that last year, she went on a trip abroad with her siblings. From what I understand, my brother stayed home with their kids during that time, just as she stayed home while we were in Scotland. I have no idea if her siblings sent my brother a thank you text for babysitting his own children, but somehow, I highly doubt it. The dynamic there seems very one-sided. It's hard not to feel like there's some kind of double standard at play, where she expects everyone to bend over backward to acknowledge her sacrifices, but she doesn't feel the need to extend the same courtesy to others. Another thing I want to clarify is the nature of the trip. This wasn't a family vacation where other people were excluded. It was a birthday gift, plain and simple. My brother knew how much I've always wanted to visit Scotland, and he planned this as a special surprise for me. The finances were tight in the sense that he could only afford to take the two of us, but even if money hadn't been an issue, this trip wasn't meant to include anyone else. It was never framed as something for the whole family. Everyone knew it was a one-on-one trip between me and my brother, and as far as I was aware at the time, my sister-in-law was completely fine with that. She even smiled and told me to have fun when we left. The sudden change in her attitude after we got back has left me feeling blindsided. It's also worth mentioning that when my brother first told me about the trip, I did thank both him and my sister-in-law. I remember asking him if she was really okay with us going, and he assured me that everything was fine. He specifically told me not to worry about anything and just to focus on enjoying myself. At no point did anyone suggest that I needed to do anything beyond that to express my gratitude. I thought I had handled it appropriately at the time, and it wasn't until I got that text from her days after we got back that I realized she felt differently. What really stings, though, is what I learned afterward. My brother eventually let slip that not only did my sister-in-law not contribute financially to the trip, but she also told him she wouldn't have wanted to come anyway. Apparently, she said something along the lines of, "I wouldn't enjoy spending a week with her," referring to me. When I heard that, it felt like a punch to the gut. It made me question everything. Was this whole situation really about gratitude, or was it just an excuse for her to lash out at me because she doesn't like me? Did she see this as an opportunity to drive a wedge between me and my brother? I've spent a lot of time thinking about why this has escalated the way it has, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion: this isn't really about me not thanking her. It's about her insecurities and her need for control. My sister-in-law has never been comfortable with how close my siblings and I are, and I think she sees it as a threat. She's made comments in the past about how we're too involved in each other's lives, and I've always tried to brush it off, but now I'm wondering if this is her way of trying to create distance. By convincing my brother to go low contact with me, she's effectively isolated him from the rest of the family. It's hard not to feel like this was her goal all along. What hurts the most is how quickly my brother sided with her. This is the man who used to be my rock, the person I could always count on no matter what. And now, he's treating me like I'm the problem, like I did something unforgivable by not groveling at his wife's feet. I miss him so much, and I hate the idea that our relationship might never go back to the way it was. But at the same time, I can't bring myself to apologize for something I don't believe I did wrong. I've already thanked her, even though I don't think I should have had to, and she's still not satisfied. What more does she want from me? My siblings and my mom have been supportive, but even they're urging me to just let it go for the sake of keeping the peace. I understand where they're coming from, but I can't shake the feeling that doing so would mean sacrificing my own dignity. Update 1. After taking some time to process everything, I realized that I needed to try one last time to mend things with my brother. The situation had spiraled so far out of control that I felt like I was losing not just him, but also a part of myself. This wasn't just about the Scotland trip anymore, it was about our relationship, which had always been one of the most important constants in my life. So, with a mix of hope and dread, I picked up the phone and called him. At first, he was reluctant to talk. I could sense it in his tone, the guardedness, the hesitation. It was clear he didn't want to revisit the topic. But I pushed forward, telling him I just wanted an honest conversation. For a moment, I thought he might hang up, but then he sighed and started talking. What he said completely blindsided me. He admitted that things at home hadn't been great for a while, long before the Scotland trip ever happened. Apparently, my sister-in-law had been harboring resentment about a lot of things. She felt like she was being overlooked and underappreciated in their relationship. The Scotland trip, he explained, had been the breaking point for her. She saw it as proof that he was willing to spend money and effort on someone else, me, while neglecting their relationship. According to him, they hadn't had a proper vacation together in years, and that had been a sore spot for her. Hearing this was like a punch to the gut. It was one thing to feel like I had been unfairly dragged into their issues, but now I was finding out that the trip, which I had thought was such a thoughtful and meaningful gesture, had been tainted from the start. My brother confessed that the trip wasn't just about me. Yes, he wanted to give me a special birthday gift, but it was also his way of escaping the tension at home. He needed a break, and taking me to Scotland gave him an excuse to get away for a while. I didn't even know how to process that. The trip, which had meant so much to me, now felt like a band-aid he had slapped over his own problems. And worse, it had only made things worse between him and his wife. I couldn't help but feel used, not intentionally, maybe, but still. My brother had dragged me into a situation I never asked to be a part of, and now I was paying the price for it. But that wasn't even the worst part. As the conversation went on, my brother let slip something that left me completely stunned. He revealed that while we were in Scotland, my sister-in-law had been keeping tabs on us. She had logged into his social media accounts and read the messages he sent me about the trip. She had seen photos we took before he even posted them. Apparently, she had convinced herself that our relationship was somehow inappropriate. She thought we were too close in some of the pictures and accused him of prioritizing me over their family. I was speechless. The idea that she had been spying on us, that she had gone through his private messages and scrutinized every photo, made my skin crawl. I felt violated, like my privacy had been completely disregarded. And the fact that she had jumped to such outrageous conclusions about our relationship only added to the hurt. It wasn't just unfair, it was absurd. I told my brother that while I understood marital struggles were complicated, it wasn't fair to drag me into them. I reminded him that I had no idea any of this was going on while we were on the trip. From my perspective, everything had been fine. I had thanked both of them before we left, and I had taken his reassurances at face value. How was I supposed to know that his wife was harboring resentment or that he was using the trip as a way to escape his problems? I told him that if there was tension between them, it was on them to communicate and work through it, not to scapegoat me. He apologized, but it felt hollow. His tone was hesitant, like he was saying the words out of obligation rather than genuine remorse. He admitted that he hadn't handled things well and that he should have talked to me sooner, but it didn't feel like he fully understood the impact this had on me. It felt like he was more interested in keeping the peace with his wife than repairing the damage he had done to our relationship. He said he needed more time to figure things out, and that he hoped I could understand. When the call ended, I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I was heartbroken. My brother, the person I had always relied on, had let me down in such a profound way. But on the other hand, I felt a small sense of relief. At least now I had some clarity. I finally understood why things had escalated the way they did, even if the explanation didn't make it any easier to accept. Update 2. About 2 weeks after that difficult phone call with my brother, I was starting to feel like I had no choice but to let go of the relationship entirely. I had done everything I could to repair the damage, but he seemed more interested in placating his wife than truly addressing what had happened. It hurt, but I was beginning to make peace with the idea that our bond might never be the same. That's why, when I received a message on Instagram from an unfamiliar account, I wasn't prepared for the storm it would unleash. The account belonged to a woman named Jessica. I didn't know her, and at first, I assumed it was spam or some kind of phishing attempt. But the message started with the words, "I think you deserve to know the truth about what's going on," and I couldn't help but read on. Jessica explained that she used to work with my sister-in-law and had witnessed things that she felt I needed to be aware of. She said she had debated whether to reach out, but after following the fallout from the Scotland trip, yes, apparently my sister-in-law had been venting about it at work, she couldn't stay silent anymore. Jessica shared screenshots of conversations between her and my sister-in-law. As I scrolled through them, my stomach twisted into knots. In one message, my sister-in-law referred to me as spoiled and accused me of stealing her husband's attention. In another, she claimed I was trying to turn the kids against her, and that I was a bad influence. There were even comments about how I was too close to my brother and how our family dynamic was unnatural. It was one thing to suspect she didn't like me, but seeing it laid out so plainly was devastating. But the biggest revelation came near the end of Jessica's message. She told me that my sister-in-law had been pushing for a divorce for over a year and had only stayed in the marriage because of financial constraints. She described how my sister-in-law had repeatedly complained about my brother's family, calling us toxic and overbearing, and had been actively trying to convince him to cut us off entirely. According to Jessica, the Scotland trip wasn't the real issue. It was just the excuse my sister-in-law needed to escalate the situation and further isolate my brother from the rest of us. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at my phone. Anger, sadness, and frustration swirled inside me. The Scotland trip had been such a pure and meaningful experience for me, and now it felt tainted by the realization that it had been weaponized against me. And my brother, who had always been the person I trusted most, had been caught in the middle, manipulated into seeing me as the problem. I wrestled with whether to share the screenshots with him. Part of me worried it would only make things worse, that he would see it as me stirring up drama. But another part of me felt he deserved to know the truth. In the end, I decided to send them. I prefaced it by saying I wasn't trying to create more conflict, but I thought it was important for him to see what was being said about me, and, more importantly, about him. To my surprise, he called me almost immediately. His voice was unsteady, and I could tell he was in shock. He said he needed to talk to me in person, and we arranged to meet later that day. I didn't know what to expect, but I braced myself for the possibility that he might still try to defend her. When we met, he looked exhausted. He admitted that things at home were worse than he had let on. He had been trying so hard to hold everything together that he hadn't wanted to confront the truth about his wife's behavior. But after seeing the screenshots, he couldn't deny it anymore. He told me he had gone through her phone after our call and found similar messages, comments about me, about our family, and even about him. It was clear she had been harboring resentment for a long time, and instead of addressing it constructively, she had been spreading lies and fueling her own narrative of victimhood. For the first time in months, I felt like my brother was truly hearing me. He apologized, not just for what had happened after the Scotland trip, but for all the ways he had let her drive a wedge between us. He admitted that he had been blinded by guilt and had been so focused on trying to save his marriage that he hadn't seen how unfairly I was being treated. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it felt like a turning point. In the weeks that followed, my brother began to set boundaries with his wife. He told her that he wouldn't tolerate her speaking negatively about me or the rest of our family. He started prioritizing open communication and made it clear that he wouldn't cut us off, no matter how much she pushed. It wasn't an overnight transformation. There were arguments, and she resisted at first, but slowly, things began to shift. She realized that her attempts to isolate him were backfiring and that he was serious about maintaining his relationships with us. As for me, my brother and I are rebuilding our connection one step at a time. He started reaching out more, sharing updates about his kids and asking about my life. He's even floated the idea of taking another trip together someday, this time with his children, so they can experience the closeness of family that he grew up with.